For another special moment here today, the KJLH Men's Empowerment Summit. And to chat with Mayor Karen Bass, a very special brother in the community. He's been in this community for a long time doing great things. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage my man, Mr. Anthony Samad.
Thank you, Brother Andre. Andre for real this time, right? How you brothers and sisters doing? Okay, so we've had a hell of a week, right? And, you know, a lot of people are afraid to talk, and then there's people who talk out the side of their neck. And, you know, God is not to be mocked, okay? And we have a situation here in Los Angeles. I'm laying context now to bring out our mayor. This is a strong sister I go back 40 years with. This is one of the few sisters that I know that have went from the streets to the suites, okay? Those of you who remember back in the 1990s, when she founded Community Coalition, this sister closed 200 liquor stores, you know, to keep our community from being poisoned, okay? When they finally convinced her to leave from Community Coalition, she was the first black woman who became the majority leader of the California Assembly. She was the first black woman to become Speaker of the Assembly, okay? She went to Congress and became the second chair of the House's subcommittee on Africa. She followed Mervyn Dimely, who was the first. Mervyn Dimely is who the Dimely Institute on this campus was named after. Okay. And then she came home from Congress to save her city. And this has been a hell of a year. No mayor has gone through all the things that she's gone through, but she has handled it like the champion she is. This ICE raids thing is more than a thing. This is not about immigrants, trust me. And when we bring her out here, we're gonna get into the deep end of the pool on that, and hopefully some of you can swim. And if you can't, you better learn fast. Because who you think they're coming for next? That's what this really is about. And they've taken this to DC, Baltimore, taken it to New York, taken it to Chicago, announced this week they're going to Memphis. Who lives in those cities? Okay? So, not to get too far ahead in the conversation, but the context is always important. When you see this stuff on television about the ICE raids, okay, you see a 2-minute segment, and they give our mayor 15 seconds to rebut. Sometimes they give her 5, okay? That's not a fair coverage. But there's a message under the guise of, exporting criminals and exporting those who are here illegally. Okay. There's another play that we need to be aware of, because they always come for black men. Okay, they might start on another premise, but they always come for black men. So without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce the mayor, the first woman mayor, not the first woman black mayor, the first woman mayor of the city of Los Angeles, my friend, Miss Karen Bass.
appreciate that. Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you. I got dressed up on a Saturday morning. That's a challenge. So let's lay some ground rules. Whether you agree with what we're saying or not, be respectful. If you don't respect the woman, at least respect the office. Okay? We are going to have a candid conversation, no filter, which means we're going to talk about the stuff they don't talk about on television. Because they try to make our sister look crazy, don't they? They can't do it, though. She has too much dignity. She has too much integrity. And falsehood can never stand in the face of truth. And she comes from a position of truth. So they just have to back up. But they don't give her the time that they should give her on television to really explain the full context because they don't want you to know. So I'm going to just throw the mic to her and ask her the first question. Mayor Bass, what is these ICE raids really about?
Well, first of all, Dr. Samad, thank you so much for your years and years and years of friendship.
Thank you.
And for your leadership here at this institution, of which I graduated from. And let me just acknowledge one of my heroes who's here in the front row, Mr. Stevie Wonder. Mr. Stevie Wonder, who, oh my goodness, what we could talk about in terms of him. You know, I was talking to some younger folks, and they didn't realize that the reason we have the Martin Luther King holiday is because of Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
So we often will forget or not know, you know, our history, but right now, Stevie and I are working on what I think is one of the biggest crises facing African Americans in Los Angeles, and that's homelessness. Because we are 9% of the population, and we are over 30% of the people who are on the street, and this morning, 4 or 5 of them didn't wake up, because that is the statistic for every single day. So I just wanted to acknowledge my hero. And I know for all of you, he's your hero as well. So can we give him a round of applause? Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm sorry, your question was, what's the ICE raids about? Well, you know, let me just say that what we need to remember, because our memories are short, the minute they came into office in January, the first group that was attacked was DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, AKA black folk. And you saw the termination of black leaders in DC immediately, from the Secretary of Defense, the Library of Congress, you can go on and on. And so we need to think about what came in terms of immigration. It started with us, and the ICE raids here are focused on Latinos, and in my opinion, it's the hunting of Latinos. But if you look at the ICE raids in Florida, they're Haitian. And I think a lot of times black folk, especially in LA, I think it's different kind of in New York, but we don't think about the hundreds of thousands of black folks in LA who are also immigrants, who come from Belize or Jamaica, a lot of African countries represented right here. So this is an issue that impacts all of us. But one thing is that I would say is that once upon a time, we were told there were 3 co-equal branches of government, but really what has happened with this administration is we just have 1 branch of government, because in the first term, they really compromised the courts by appointing very conservative 40-year-olds, because when you're appointed, it's a lifetime appointment, which means those people could be on the court for 40 years. Then you have the Speaker of the House and the head of the Senate, who essentially went over to Pennsylvania Avenue and handed their gavels over. So you really have the entire country, for the first time in 249 years, being led by the White House, by the administration. And so you know the commitment coming in was to deport more people than have ever been deported before. And in my opinion, it really goes back to the trauma that a percentage of our country felt when that black family moved into the White House, and recognizing that moving forward in the near future, the rest of the country is going to look like California, which is majority folks of color.
Okay, so let's talk about the Constitution. This appears to be an assault on the states, okay? The federal government does not have the authority to police. Police is a state power and local municipality power. How are the courts upholding this? Because it is clear that this administration, you don't like saying his name any more than I do, stacked the courts in his first term.
Right.
And they're not following constitutional or legal precedent. Yet, just a week ago, they ruled in favor of the administration to allow the ICE raids to continue. And so, give me your opinion, or maybe your knowledge of fact, as to how this is being upheld.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say that I am not a lawyer, okay? But I do think it's an obvious interpretation of the Constitution, which is what you just said. What happened here, though, is that the administration seized power from our governor. The governor is the one who is responsible for the National Guard. The governor is the one who deploys the National Guard when a local government requests it. For example, after the fires, the National Guard was needed. A lot of times we're used to seeing the Guard being connected with natural disasters. Now, when we had the civil unrest in 1992, the National Guard was called out. So it's in extraordinary times, but you don't call the President of the United States for the National Guard in California, you call the governor. What the White House did was they seized the authority, because basically, ultimately, it is the federal government that can take over a locality, but it had not happened before like this, against the will of the government, when the local governments did not request, either from the state or the federal. We did not request 700 Marines to come here. We did not request 4,000 National Guard. And just a word about the National Guard, because I think a lot of times we don't know, but the National Guard, they're part-time. These are people who are going to school, who are working, and who have families. And when they're called to duty, they have to leave all of that. It's not like the Marines that are signed up to do that. So we had already deployed the National Guard in the fire impacted areas for months, and now they were being called back again. I'm not saying it was the same people, I don't know, but just to understand that it is a complete disruption of their lives to come here. And then on top of that, they were never needed. It was a political stunt to begin with. So we did have 2 court orders that upheld the authority of the governor and said that, I'm sorry, not one court upheld the authority of the governor, and then it was reversed at the 2nd court. The lawsuit that was filed on behalf of the ACLU and public counsel, that the city of Los Angeles joined in that lawsuit, that was around racial profiling, because it was and is racial profiling for them to go to Home Depots or to go to car washes, or for them to randomly pull over people on the street. Now, nobody is talking about folks who are known criminals, who, you know, are sex offenders or you know, violent criminals. That's what the administration said in the beginning. But how do you know by going to a Home Depot when you see a group of day laborers there that any of them are suspect of anything? So basically what they were doing is, on the idea that you are Latino or you speak Spanish, that makes you a suspect. And then they keep going back and forth as to how they define it, because they start off by talking about violent criminals, and then you have members of the administration who say the fact that you're in the country illegally makes you a criminal. In fact, many of the people who have been detained actually are here legally. Now, they're not citizens necessarily, but they have their papers. For example, if you are an immigrant and you're here legally, you have to report into immigration court once a year. They were detaining people for doing what we asked them to do. And then you can imagine then they're not going to go to appointments, and then they're going to fall out of status where they are here, you know, illegally. Now, if they were just concerned about that, why aren't they looking for Canadians? You know, because if you're going to look at numbers, there's thousands of Canadians who overstay their visa. That's not who they were interested in. The fact of the matter is, Los Angeles is an immigrant city in the sense that there are entire sectors of our economy that cannot function without immigrant labor. And so it actually impacts all of us when you hit the economy. For example, if you want to see rebuilding done in Altadena, Palisades, and Malibu, well, who do you think does construction work? And so if you have raids going on, that's going to impact the speed at which rebuilding can be done.
Mayor Bass, let's take a deeper dive on that. The whole politic of arresting someone without due process.
Right.
Okay, which is the Fourth Amendment. You have the right, you know, to unwarranted search and seizure. They cannot seize you or your property without a warrant. And a lot of innocent people have been arrested under this guise of the administration gaslighting. The justification for sending in the National Guard was, you know, Los Angeles is under attack. He even told a lie, which is not unique to him, that Los Angeles was on fire. Los Angeles was burning. You're like, man, you need to stop.
LA would have burnt down if he hadn't sent the National Guard.
Right.
He was claiming success, so literally the only reason we were having any protest to begin with is because of the raids. Right. And the raids happened on Friday. There was a big protest on Saturday. And at the end of the protests, which is not all that uncommon, you have a few stragglers, and those stragglers did vandalize a lot of, the graffiti was horrible that was done downtown. And so he said on Sunday that the reason why the protest was ended Saturday night was because he had sent out the National Guard. In fact, the National Guard didn't even get here until Sunday evening.
So this assault on the Fourth Amendment and this whole politic of detention and government officials not being able to get into detention centers. Have you been able to get into the detention centers?
No, I haven't tried. You know, it's the congressional folks who actually have oversight over the immigration facilities. So they are denied their oversight. When I was a member of Congress, I did, because you know I was involved in a lot of criminal justice reform, and especially about incarcerated women, and we visited women's prisons. You know, that's part of being a member of Congress, but not being mayor.
So why isn't Congress pushing back on that? Because that's a congressional authority, right? Oversight
It is.
For those of you who don't know, Congress runs the government. President administers the government. Congress passes the budget, Congress passes the law, then they give it to the executive, and the executive carries it out. But they're supposed to carry it out with the intent of Congress, okay? And then Congress has the oversight to review everything that they put money places, and they put a grip of money into Homeland Security, you know? And so why isn't Congress taking action? The president can only issue executive orders and those things at a point where Congress has remained silent. But the moment Congress makes a law, then it becomes authority. Okay, so my question.
So, you know, I know a lot of people get frustrated with the Democrats, like why aren't the Democrats doing this? Why aren't the Democrats doing that? You know, I did serve in Congress for 12 years, and I think what a lot of people don't realize, the majority party controls everything that he just described. And so Hakeem Jeffries might be the head of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, but he can't even go on the floor of Congress and speak unless he's given permission to do that. Meaning they just won't turn on the mics. It's very simple. And so the Democratic members of Congress have been doing everything they can, which is why you see Congresswoman Waters go to a detention site and push back and try to get in. Well, them doing that at a number of facilities around the country did result in them eventually being able to go in. But they don't have the authority, as long as they are in the minority, they do not have the authority to pass legislation. They just have their voices in the bully pulpit. Now, part of the reason why Governor Newsom is doing what he's doing around redistricting is so that Democrats can get back in the majority. So if Democrats were in the majority, we could do what you just described. But then the other problem we have, and this is just the structure of our democracy, you know, you need 2 houses in order for anything to happen. So even if we were in the majority in the House, you have to have the majority in the Senate as well to follow through, to give that authority that Dr. Samad said should be implemented by the administration. But here's an additional problem we have this time around, and I don't know if it's the first time in history, but I do know it's the first time in recent history, okay? Where you have an administration that even if Congress says do X, Y, and Z, they're not necessarily gonna do it. So we are in a dilemma, and I just hope that it helps everybody understand the consequence of their vote and of their administration. And, you know, you might not be in love with who is representing the Democratic Party, but the way we're set up here, you got 2 choices. And so when you choose not to vote, you're empowering the other side.
That's an applause line. I want to ask you about yourself personally. You know, how's your heart? You know, I text you from time to time and tell you I'm praying for you and those types of things. But you can tell it's wearing on you a little bit. You got a lot coming at you. Talk a little bit about what governing is right now at this point in time, being a first of many firsts.
Well, I mean, I think, it's interesting. This is, I have been in office before. The job of mayor is you are responsible for anything and everything, even if it's like I got yelled at one day by this man who said I wasn't issuing building permits fast enough in Pasadena. It's like, last I checked, they have their own mayor. And typically in our area, people don't know who's in LA and who's not in LA. You know, like for example, Altadena. You know, I don't think a lot of people thought about it before, but Altadena is an unincorporated area. It's not in the city of Los Angeles. I have no authority over Altadena, and Altadena doesn't have a mayor, doesn't have a city council. Altadena does have a supervisor in the county board of supervisors who's excellent, and we work together extremely well. But we don't typically know how our government works. So I've been doing this since the day I ever took office. I spend a lot of time explaining to people,
what you don't do.
Right, what I don't do or what I can do or what's in the authority of this or the authority of that. People will often say to me, well, why don't you fix the schools? Well, I don't govern the schools. But in some cities like Chicago, for example, and New York, those mayors do control the schools. In the city of Los Angeles, we have an independent school board. But you asked me how I'm doing. I mean, I've been a fighter. I've been involved in politics, not necessarily electoral politics. Most of my life was spent in community issues, dealing with what was happening on the ground in South LA. And then I also have always been involved in foreign policy issues too, related to Africa and the Caribbean. So, I'm used to the fight. That's what I signed up for. I've been active in this way since I was in middle school. And then, you know, I did spend 4 years in with the first administration. So I'm used to the Trump administration. And so for me right now, my gloves are on. My gloves are always on. I'm always going to fight. I'm always going to fight for justice. I'm always going to fight on behalf of our city. That's what I was born to do. So, you know, I'm energized. I'm energized now, especially by the love and the solidarity that people are feeling in our city. And I know people have differences of opinion individually, but our city has stood together. I think the goal might have been to divide us, to get us fighting each other, to split the city, but that has not happened in our city. I think everybody has been morally outraged. And then it's the solidarity of the other mayors. You know, the administration targeted 8 cities, and what does each of those cities have in common?
Unknown
Right.
Karen Bass fact. How many of you know that she's a black belt in martial arts? Been one for
Brown belt.
a while. Red, excuse me. But the bottom line is the calm demeanor is not to be mistaken. Okay? You find yourself twisted up quickly before her security gets to you. But let's redirect the question, because you know your staff put me on guardrails, things I could talk about, things I couldn't talk about. So
really?
I said we were only going to talk about, you know, the ICE raids, but I know
No,
homelessness
you
is
talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay.
Okay.
I got permission. Let's talk about how the ICE raids and some of the other catastrophes that have occurred within our city and county during your tenure have impacted the homeless populations. You know, the other factor is, you know, you have these humongous events coming up, you know, the Olympics, the Super Bowl, you know, where they're trying to move the homeless from one part of the city to another part of the city or out of the city. Yeah, thank you for your contribution. All right, okay. All right, so we hopefully will get to that piece. Tell us how that is complicating the challenge to house the unhoused.
So, well, let me just say that the reason why I chose to leave Congress, you know, it wasn't that I was tired of being there. I love the idea that I could work on domestic issues like criminal justice reform and focus on Africa, especially in regard to trade and business development. That was my focus. I love that, that I was able to do that. Thank you. But the decision to leave that was really because of our people on the street. I mean, again, I gave you the statistic, 9%, 30%. And you know, we had been trying, and you remember this, in the 90s, when I started a community coalition, we were focusing on the unhoused population then. What we were trying to do in South LA was we had 54 motels in one council district, Council District 8, but we didn't have any tourists. So you know what was happening in the motels. So our idea then was we can deal with 2 problems at once. We can use the motels for the people who were homeless, and that would also decrease crime and the drug dealing that was happening. Everybody laughed at us then because, and that was 1993, by the way, because at that time, homeless people were in 2 places. They were in South Central and Skid Row, and wasn't nobody caring about it. And so what happened is that when homelessness spread citywide, including some of the affluent areas, then all of a sudden it's a crisis. But my concern, and I was having these flashbacks to the 1990s when we had this other crisis, it was called crack cocaine and the Crips and the Bloods, and in one of those years we had 1,000 homicides. And now we're upset if we have, I mean, obviously 1 homicide is too many, okay? Be very clear about that. But now, you know, if it's 300, I mean, compared to 1,000. So actually, during those years, I walked away from another job. I was full-time faculty at USC Medical School. And I left that job to go to 85th and Broadway to start the Community Coalition to address that crisis, which in my point of view was a health, a social, and an economic crisis. It was a criminal crisis too. But the only thing politicians were doing during those years was passing laws to lock us up longer and longer and longer, and they weren't dealing with the problem. So my fear was that was where we were going to go with the homeless situation. We were just going to start locking people up because voters had passed ballot initiatives a couple of times and the problem just got worse. So that's why I did run. And but once I ran on day one, I put the city in a state of emergency because to me it's an emergency if 3, 4, 5 people are dying every day and living on our streets in the nation's second largest city, one of the richest cities on the planet, and we can't figure out how to get our people off the streets. And so what I'm happy to say is that in the 2 years that I've been in, I'm in my 3rd year now, for the first time, we have had 2 years of a decrease of people being on our streets. And we have found that, I mean, to me, I think one of the most important things that has happened in my time is that we have disproved the myth that our people want to be on those streets. That is a lie. Our people do not want to be on those streets. We do not have trouble getting them off the streets. The only time we run into trouble convincing somebody to leave is people who are so ill that they don't even know they're on the street. And I believe that people who are suffering from severe mental illness should be hospitalized even if it's against their will. I do not believe that freedom is suffering and dying on the street. But basically what we do in our society is we leave you on the street and until you either hurt yourself or you hurt somebody else. And you see this happening all the time. It happens every day. And it's interesting because some people say, well, you should be able to be on the street if you don't have a place to live. But I find that usually the only people like that are people who go home to a bed at night. I don't think any of our people should be on the street ever. So we work to get people off the street, but I've also been fast-tracking the building of housing. But even though we have fast-tracked, we have like 20,000 units under development right now because of the fast-tracking. But even as fast, it still takes 2 to 3 years to build. And I do not believe that our people should be waiting on the street. Now, it is expensive to put people in motels, but how expensive is it to leave people on the street? When people, one of the major reasons for fires in our city is because of homeless people. You know, the crime that's associated with surviving on the street, the compromising to businesses, to the quality of life in neighborhoods, to schools, all of that is a cost as well. We actually spend millions and millions and millions of dollars because we leave people on the street. So if I have a choice between spending money to help people stay on the street or spending money to get people off the street, it is a better investment to me to get people off the street and to help them become self-sufficient.
Okay, so we're gonna go a little deeper. We are gonna have a question and answer, and you're gonna, okay, this is how we're gonna do this. That's if the mayor has time. How much time do I have, Ron?
I think I'm fine.
Okay, she says she wanna stay here and talk to y'all, but y'all not just gonna start yelling out and doing all that stuff. When we get through, we will go to a mic over here, and we will take as many questions as time allows. But this was supposed to be a chat, okay? There's a bigger problem that you don't discuss, and certainly other folk don't discuss, which is the politics of NIMBYism.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, NIMBYism is not in my backyard. You even got black folk talking about you not building 20 units across the street from my $1 million house or $2 million house, which is an impediment.
It is, but what I have found is that, you know, especially as my background as a community organizer, the best way to get building done is to do it with the community. And so I have found in some neighborhoods where they don't want to see housing built on their block, they are open to having it built nearby. I mean, take Crenshaw Boulevard, for example, you know, where people who live off of Crenshaw, say in Leimert Park, they wouldn't want their neighborhoods of single-family homes to all of a sudden be, you know, peppered with big apartment buildings. But it's on Crenshaw, so it's on the commercial corridors. And that's what we're finding more and more. Rather than force people to do things, and I find that when you do force people to do things, then the NIMBYism is in capital letters on steroids. Kevin Murray, for example, who heads up the Weingart Center, and you know Kevin, you're a former state senator, been around the community for a long time. He was building this homeless apartment in Westwood, okay? Across the street from a Porsche dealership within eyeshot of the Mormon temple. So you know what neighborhood I'm talking about. And when he started to do that, everybody was like, ah, you know, losing their mind, even though it was going to be on a commercial strip. He worked with those neighbors. And then by the time the facility opened up, and I was there for the grand opening, those same neighbors who opposed it were there for the tour because he worked with them. And today, if you drive down Santa Monica Boulevard across the street from the Porsche dealership, you will see this brand new apartment building that never in a million years would you think that that would be homeless housing. So there's a way to do it, I believe.
Okay. All right, let's put a bow on this. We got a couple people want to ask you a question. Where do you see this, these ICE raids going? How do we put an end to it, or do we have to sustain this for another 2.5 years while, you know, we have my opinion, this is not the opinion of California State University's Megan's Hills, we have a madman in the White House.
Well, you know what, it is a big concern. The bottom line is that we're not sure. We're just not sure, because we can have a good court opinion like we did. We had 2 court opinions that said you could not racially profile. Now last week, or the week before, I lose track of time, it went before the Supreme Court and they reversed it, which said you can racially profile. But even when we had 2 court decisions that said you couldn't, they still violated the court decision. And that's what's happening with this administration that we've never seen before, which is the open violation of the law. So you asked me where it's going, and I have to be honest and say I'm not sure. I have been warned, one publicly, and you hear he talks about me from the White House. It's like, oh Lord, I don't know why. And he says all this nonsense. I mean, it's one thing to exaggerate or embellish. He just invents stuff, you know? I was responsible for the water, and I didn't turn on the valve, and that's why there wasn't any water. I mean, it's just nonsensical stuff.
Yeah, he makes up a lot of stuff. He certainly does. All right, well, let's give our mayor a round of applause. Okay, now we're going to take a few questions. Now, you guys attended 20 years of urban issues forums. You know how I roll. Ask a question. Don't get up there and give us that you have a dream speech, okay? Because you will be interrupted, okay?
Thanks a lot. Ray Richardson from the Wave newspaper. Hi, Mayor. On Thursday, there was a fatality in Chicago when ICE encountered a so-called immigrant, and that person died. I wanted to find out, how concerned are you with the ruling that happened by the Supreme Court that there could be some escalation between immigrants and ICE agents, and what should the LAPD's role be in this to avoid any potential friction and tension in the community because of the raids?
So, yes, I know I heard what happened in Chicago, but remember, here there were 2 deaths as well. One death in Los Angeles, actually in Los Angeles County, and the other one was in Oxnard, I believe, related to ICE raids. And so that is a danger that I'm very, very concerned about. I mean, what was happening here is you'd have these cars, unmarked cars, tinted windows, drive up and down the street, masked men in dubious uniforms that they look like they got off of Amazon, rifles in hand, pulling random Latinos over and detaining them. And so anytime you have a situation like that, that could be very volatile. If I think I'm being kidnapped and I actually happen to be armed, legally or illegally, you could imagine what would happen there. We also are in a real dilemma over the sanctuary city law, because I think the sanctuary city law, there was a lot implied in that, but with a rogue administration, you wonder the strength of it. So for example, it says that LAPD won't cooperate with ICE, okay? So LAPD doesn't technically cooperate with ICE, but when you have a confrontation that's happening in the street, LAPD's role is to make sure that confrontation doesn't take place. And then to people who are involved, how do they distinguish between is LAPD helping or hurting? And then I think some people had the expectation that LAPD would actually arrest ICE members who were violating the temporary restraining order by conducting the raids. Then you get into a situation of two arms of law enforcement in a physical confrontation with each other. So they have complicated everything with this and kind of turned on its head what expectations were. So I think LAPD is in a precarious position, as we all are.
Hi, Mayor Bass. I would like to thank Stevie Wonder for holding this event. And I'm here because I'm a first-generation Nigerian American, and the U.S. government is trying to frame me as an immigrant, because when I tried to sign up for my CNA, I used to have my RN license, and they stripped that from me because I was complaining about CPS molesting my kids with my ex-husband. So I'm now trying to get a CNA license. When I tried to apply for a CNA license, they told me to do a live scan for U.S. visa and immigration. And I'm not an immigrant. I'm a first-generation American. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to deport me and then keep my kids here and molest them with my ex-husband, because he's also a foster child. He's a product of the system, and he's molesting my children. What can you do to help me not get deported, because I am a first-generation American?
Yeah, see?
Okay, is there a question in that?
Yeah, what can I do to help?
All right.
Yeah, see, you're a perfect example because you're not a immigrant. You were born here in the United States, but of immigrant, maybe your parents were immigrants. I can talk to you outside of here. I mean, there are the immigrant rights organizations. I'm not sure if you're connected to them, but if you're not, I will be happy to connect you. That's Nicole Bernard. She's a member of my staff. So email us, okay, and we will make the connections that you need. But see, this is what I mean, is that, you think that everybody that is being detained or under threat, number one, is Latina. She's Nigerian. And number two, is here illegally. And I'm sorry for what you are going through, but I think you are a perfect example that once these kind of things happen, there's no boundaries on them. And by the way, would you, okay. Yeah. And thank you. And by the way, I have been to Nigeria, and Nigeria, the largest economy on the continent of Africa. And by the way, if you don't know this already, African immigrants are, if not the number one, the number two most educated immigrants that come to the United States. You wouldn't think that, would you? Nobody would tell you that.
Next question.
Mic 6.
Hello, testing. Hello, Mayor. Thank you for being here. Out of knowledge of living as an unhoused person, what would your answer be to all of the designated facilities and agencies that's pocketing the money and that are at the end of the year, mismanaging the funds and putting it somewhere else where the house is still on the street, and they're not putting them in places for them to stay. And then you have owners that own 35 motels that you guys have contracted who treat a lot of the unhoused like slum and less than dogs. Dogs are treated better than a lot of the unhoused are treated. And that they claim that they're really trying to help, and they're not. They're taking people who are severely mentally disturbed so they can take them and control them in the housing and pretend that they're really trying to place them somewhere and leave them there for a week or two and then kick them back out on the street.
Well, you know what? I think there are always bad actors with a population of unhoused. By the way, in just our city alone, we're talking 46,000 people. So when I say 30% are black, by the way, 40% are Latino. So the homelessness population is a black and brown issue. And anytime you have numbers like that, and you have a system that was kind of slammed together, you are going to have bad actors. I do not believe that bad actors color the entire field. What I do believe is a lot of the community-based organizations, by the way, when we get somebody off the street and put them in a motel, then a community-based organization that she is describing takes over. The city's job is to get you off the street. None of those organizations have the resources to do what I believe is needed. And I think one of the weakest parts of the system is that we know how to get people off the streets. Where we're not good is in providing the resources and services that they need to ultimately be self-sufficient. So for example, when you're in the motel, what are you doing all day? We don't have the programming in place, we don't have the, and these community-based organizations are left, to do that. Now, also having said that, there needs to be transparency in what everybody and anybody does. But I do believe, and we've never talked about this, Dr. Samad, but I do believe that one of the fundamental problems of the United States, our economic system, is that we have monetized everything, and we've monetized poverty. And so there are always people, we used to have a phrase for them back in the day, but there's always people, always bottom feeders, who are gonna try to see how they can make some money off of somebody else's suffering. I do
She
not
can't
believe,
say it, but I will. Poverty pimps.
Excuse me, Mayor. You didn't
do-
answer my question.
well, let me finish what I was gonna say. I do believe that the majority of the people in the field are not intentionally exploiting it. And I'm sorry, I thought I did answer your question.
Okay, we have time for one more question. We promised to keep the mayor just 1 hour, and she's been here 59 minutes. So do we have one more question?
Yeah, check, right here.
Thank you for coming, Mayor Bass. I have a question. As a person that works 3 jobs, and I see my tax dollars going towards illegals, and we say that we can't prioritize blackness according to affirmative action, in which we know blacks weren't the ones that capitalized off of that. Others capitalized off of that more than we did. So how is it that we're doing this? And again, we also had the Asian hate law, which prioritized a specific race of people, but again, we can't do these things for blacks, so I'm really bewildered in this. And then knowing that our plight and our journey here is not the same as others. When others, they jumped in boats and jumped over gates to get here. When our ancestors and elders, they jumped in ocean with sharks to avoid this fate that we're facing today, And
Brother,
then again,
is there a question in there?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
And that too, that's a statement, but the question is, even the sanctuary cities with impact federal fundings, we know that the black community is the one on life support more than any other community, although we're the minority of the minorities, and when it comes to everything that's good, we're at the bottom of the list, and everything that's bad, we're systematically at the top of it, and it's all about the design of the system that these things are happening. So how is it, again, that we can't prioritize blackness? I'm confused.
So
and
let
being
me-
that we're the ones that, hold on, I'm not through, but I'm saying this,
We got a little bit of time. Yeah.
okay.
I
but-
got your
okay.
question.
But again, we're the ones that built this.
I got your question. So let me go back to one of your first questions was, people who are not here legally are taking advantage of different programs within the system. First of all, are you gonna get that microphone up, or are we gonna go back and forth, or what? Okay. Most of that is just simply not true. If you are not here legally, you cannot get public assistance, you cannot get food stamps. In the state of California, you can get health care because the state kicked in money so that we provide health care to everybody in the state. However, because of the administration, the state of California has even had to backtrack on providing health care to everybody, whether they were citizens or not. Now, as a former health care provider, I believe in that very strongly, because if you only provide health care to one segment, you are compromising everybody, because in order to keep people healthy, everybody needs to have access to health care. In terms of us being on the bottom, as I said, one of the reasons why, the main reason why I wanted to be in this position is to take care of our people who are extremely disproportionately impacted by every statistic. But the statistic that I was most concerned about is the statistic of leaving our people on the street to die every day, or our people who are being locked up, which is why I've spent many, many years working on sentencing reform and criminal justice reform, to prevent our people from even going in. So one thing that I did in my administration is, in terms of crime, obviously if crime happens, you deal with it. But I'm a very big believer in preventing crime. So I started the Office of Community Safety, and the focus of that office is on preventing crime and working specifically in our community to reduce and prevent homicides and gang violence, which is also why we've had a serious reduction in gang violence. We have brothers and sisters who were formerly incarcerated, who were formerly involved in gangs, who now are participating in a program to, as they have changed their life around, and they are called violence interrupters, community intervention workers. We hire them. When I was running, I told them that I thought all of them needed a major raise because they weren't making enough money. And the whole point was to keep them on the straight and narrow. So I gave them a $20,000 raise because I wanted them to stay in the legal economy and not feel pulled back into the illegal economy. So am I doing enough? No, absolutely not. I wish I could do tons more, but understand that the motivation to be here, period, was to address what I feel are the most serious crises in our community.
Brothers and sisters, let's give our mayor a round of applause. Mayor Karen Bass.
Thank you.
Thank you, KJLH, for making this space happen. Thank you, the mayor's office. The mayor's extremely busy, but they made time for this. Now I'm gonna ask you guys to do me a favor. Can you hold your seat while our mayor exits? We don't want a lot of movement. Okay. We at this time, just hold your seat for a second. Let the mayor leave, and then we'll let you guys go to the next workshop. Give another round of applause for KJLH.